All right, it's time to talk about Lost Mars. Stories from the Golden Age of the Red Planet, edited by Mike Ashley. So, okay. It's what it says it is. It's a collection of short stories that are set on Mars, and they're specifically of the older variety of science fiction where Mars is written about, like, you know, there were ancient civilizations on it and stuff. And, you know, it was fine. Some of the stories I thought were pretty boring, frankly. One of them by H.G. Wells, I was just like, what's the point of this, though? But some of them I had a good time with, and some of them I've already read. So it was kind of a mixed bag, I guess, as far as that goes. Let's see. Shout out to Crucifixus Etiam by Walter M. Miller Jr. for being really good. Although I've also read that one already this year before in a different collection. I also... Ooh, what was the other one I liked? I liked A Martian Odyssey? Yeah. That one was interesting. And The Forgotten Man of Space. Just some, like, interesting takes on Mars. I mean, especially thought a number of these stories really don't fall into that traditional, like, it's Mars and there's, you know, the ancient remains of civilization kind of wearing away, and, like, it was interesting the stories that didn't fall under that, and they were more like, on Mars there are these strange creatures that are kind of like rabbits, but sentient. So it was pretty good. Yeah, but I didn't find anything in here that was new and that really blew me away, new to me, and blew me away. So I just don't really have that much to say about it. Yeah, it is what it is. It's an interesting idea for a collection. I think it would be really cool to have an equivalent collection about Venus, but according to commenters on Goodreads, at least, that doesn't exist, which is too bad. But whatever. Also, I really love the cover. It's very cool. Okay. I think that's all. We'll just keep this one short and sweet. Hello, it's time to finally talk about Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I say finally because I finished it like 3 days ago, but I have not had time. Okay, so Into the Water is kind of a mystery thriller, mostly a mystery, I guess, and it's set in a small town in England, which is famous for a particular, I guess it's kind of a bend in their river that forms a pool. And except that, of course, my brain kept just imagining it as like a pool without a connection to, like, a pond. And every time I was like, no dude, it's part of a river, but whatever. And anyway, it's infamous because people have been, like, drowned there in a variety of ways over the years. And the story is mostly about, like, it starts, this woman who was from the town has just died, and they don't know if it was suicide or murder because she died falling off the cliff into the pool. So, like, they aren't sure if she was pushed or if she jumped. And she had been writing this book about all of the different women who have drowned in the drowning pool. And her sister comes back into town to look after her daughter. And there's just, like, a bunch of perspective characters because also, like, earlier, I guess it was earlier that year, yeah, this teenage girl killed herself by jumping into the river there, or nearby there. There's also a bridge right there too. I was picturing it not perhaps the way it was being described, so I kept getting a little bit confused. This does not matter. What does matter is, was it, like, a good book? It was fine. I think I kind of had ultimately to say that it was fine. There were things I liked about it, but I kind of thought there were too many characters. I thought it like just didn't really stay maybe as focused because of all those extra characters as I would have wanted. I felt like maybe there were things it was trying to say, but it didn't really quite work. Paula Hawkins also wrote The Girl on the Train, and so that's why I read this book, because I really liked The Girl on the Train. And I thought that one was a lot more like focused because it only had like 3 characters. And yeah, I didn't find any of the protagonists like that interesting in this book. Some of them, I mean, a little bit interesting, kind of. And there was some just like complex relationship stuff going on that was kind of interesting. But it took me a while to get into it, and then ultimately I wasn't that satisfied with the ending. I feel like, oh, there was the thing with her bracelet. I don't understand quite the logistics of how it got from which person to which. I'm gonna be vague because I guess I might as well not spoil it. But I also kind of, it got to a point where a character was like, oh, I killed these people, so I was like, okay. And I was like on the fence of like, on the one hand, this seems kind of obvious, and I'm not surprised that's a little bit disappointing, but on the other hand, the other possibility would bug me more, but then it turned out to be more complicated than that. Trying not to spoil it. But like, I don't know. Which is why I think I ultimately come out as just kind of a neutral, like, it was fine. It was fine. It wasn't bad. But I also just, yeah, I mean, like I said, all the things I said, it was fine. I listened to it on audiobook, so that's why I don't have it. And I think that's about all I have to say about it. Yeah. Oh, the only other thing was that it was like a full cast audio, so there were like 4 or 5 different people doing voices, which I actually thought was like really quite well done, because they were, you know, it wasn't doing like any kind of irritating, they're both reading at the same time kind of things. Like, I don't really like audiobooks that end up sounding a little bit more like a radio drama or a play. If I wanted to listen to a radio drama, I would. I prefer audiobooks that tend towards somebody is reading me a book. However, this one was decently done with the multiple people reading different chapters, and I mostly bring it up because Sophie Aldred was one of the voices, and that was fun and exciting. And also I knew which one was her before. At the end they tell you like who voiced who, but when I went into it, like, I'm like, Sophie Aldred is in here, and then I heard her and I was like, that's Sophie Aldred. Okay, anyway, that was just exciting and fun for me. But it was an okay book. And has Paula Hawkins written anything else? I guess I could look it up, but I've not heard of anything else by her. But I would not say no to reading anything else by her. Yeah, so it was, yeah, I think we're good. Hello. Star Wars Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed is my latest conquest. I don't know. So, yeah. The main emotion that this book created in me was the desire to read the X-Wing books again. And I mean, you know, I think I always feel that desire to some degree, but this really brought it out because it is a book about another squadron, you know. Except there's only like 5 of them, so it's like not even that impressive of one. Okay, so Alphabet Squadron. It's in the new canon or whatever. It's set right after Return of the Jedi, and it's mostly about, well, it focuses on all these different characters who end up in what ends up getting called Alphabet Squadron. But I guess the main character of the group is Yurika Quell, who I assume is this. And she is a defector from the Empire. She was a pilot, and she gets sort of snatched up by this new Republic intelligence guy who really just wants to take down the elite squadron of TIE fighters that she used to be a part of and get intelligence from her to help do it. And then it follows her and him and a bunch of other characters who end up becoming part of this Alphabet Squadron, which gets called that because they all have, like, different kinds of starfighters. So, like, she's got an X-Wing, one of the other guys has an A-Wing, there's a Y-Wing, a B-Wing, and a U-Wing, which I don't even think existed prior to this point, so that's fun. U-Wing. Yeah, oh god, there were things in this book that just made me think of the X-Wing books, like, in a good way. But unfortunately, I think that also kind of caused me to do a lot of comparing this book to the X-Wing books, and I just, like, nothing can compare, you know? You probably don't know. But the X-Wing books is, like, one of my favorite series, and I'm just kind of obsessed with them, and it's lame, I know. But I really want to reread them. And unfortunately, like, this book didn't quite measure up, because, like, those books, like, so many emotions and feelings. This one, like, I was not that attached to anything that was going on. I don't think it was bad, though. It was a good book. Like, the characters were interesting, and I definitely want to read the sequel, because I'm curious as to what's going to happen. Like, I've definitely read Star Wars books that I liked much, much less than this one. I'll say that. But yeah, it's just the comparison. That's the issue. If the X-Wing books weren't a thing that I was in love with, then I probably would, like, comparatively be like, yeah, this was a good book. I mean, I liked that, you know, I thought the characters were all really, like, complicated, and there definitely were moments where I was like, oh yeah, I'm almost feeling something. And Hera Syndulla is also in this, because she's a general and she's, like, sort of their immediate boss, I guess. So she's in a number of scenes, and I love her. I love Hera. Although it did make me really curious as to, like, where the other characters from Rebels are at this point. I mean, like, some of them we know. But, like, you know, where's Sabine? What did she do at the end of Rebels? I don't even remember. Or, what's his name? I forgot. The big purple guy. Whoops. Him. Zeb. There we go. Zeb. God, I sound like an idiot. I may have been drinking a little bit. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But look, I think it's a pretty good book, honestly. And also, I really like the cover. Very bright and colorful and cool. Oh, and it has this, like, comic book tie-in. I guess there's a comic book about the Imperial Squadron, which is called Shadow Wing. It's not even a squadron. It's, like, even bigger than that. But, there's parts of it's just in here. I have zero interest, but that's a fun fact, I guess. That's why it says on the bottom it's a Marvel and Del Rey crossover event. So the book is Del Rey, and then Marvel made the comic. I guess Marvel does Star Wars comics now? Well, I guess that makes sense because they own Star Wars now. Back in my day, it was Dark Horse. God, I need to shut up. But okay, I am curious to see what's going to happen next with the characters, especially Yurika. I also, like, still don't understand Kairos's, like, whatever her fucking deal is. I'm curious about, and yeah, I want to see where the other characters go in the future. And I know the second book is already out, so I don't know when I'm going to read it, but, like, eventually. So, you know, it was a pretty good Star Wars book. The end. All right, today I finished In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. This is a thriller. It's a tiny little book, and it is wild. I quite liked it. I think there was a bit of a disconnect for me, because I think by the end you're supposed to really find the serial killer character like fascinating, and I was just kind of like, nah. But I really liked all the rest of it, I guess. Like, the basic premise is that it's about this young Japanese man who is, how do I put this? His job is to give people tours of Tokyo, but specifically of like the sex industry. So essentially people will hire him to show them to clubs or bars or whatever, and, you know, get them whatever it is they're wanting. And a lot of times it's foreigners, but not always. But in this case, he's hired by an American named Frank, who wants that particular tour, you know, and so that he wants to spend time with Kanji and have Kanji show him, you know, to how stuff works and where to go. And Kanji, though, begins suspecting that there's something up with this guy, and that he might actually be a serial killer who's recently killed a teenager in Tokyo and, like, dismembered her and stuff. So he's like, something's going on here. Yeah, so at first the book, it starts off kind of quite slowly, as Kanji realizes things about Frank that are strange to him, and he starts suspecting something. And then when it gets to it, it's just suddenly like horrifying and super violent, and then when that bit's over, it gets into this whole thing of Kanji not knowing like what to really do about it. It's really an interesting thing, because he's kind of caught in like not knowing how to react to this horrifying thing, and ends up spending time with this serial killer, just kind of like talking to him or listening to him talk a lot, because this guy like does not shut up. It was really interesting, and it was interesting too because there was all this like stuff about Japanese culture from the perspective of Kanji in comparison to what he knows about American culture as well. And that was just interesting to read. But yeah, I guess ultimately I would say that it was interesting and pretty different from most other things I've read. I mean, it's so short, it gets to everything so quickly, you know. But what was I saying? I think I was saying that it was translated from Japanese, which this might, no, that's, I guess manga counts technically. I was like, this might be the first book I've ever read that was translated from Japanese, but I guess that's not really true. But I haven't read a ton. Anyway, it was quite good, and I kind of got the recommendation, I guess, from Crime Reads, so, you know, and consider finding some more books on there probably. Because yeah, I don't know that much about the thrillers and the horror novels and whatnot that are a bit older. Because this was from the 90s, so yeah, it was good. Alright, so today I finished reading The Radium Girls by Kate Moore, I believe is her name, which is a non-fiction book that I listened to on audio. And this is about a... Boy, where do I start? Well, it's about industrial poisoning. It's about workers' rights, and it's got some pretty horrifying medical stuff in it, so, you know, all things that I'm kind of interested in reading about. Okay, so the basic story is that in the early 20th century, there was a big craze in America and Europe especially, I suppose, for things painted with radium, because radium glows and that's cool. And also a bunch of people were trying to convince everyone that radium was like good for you, and that worked for some reason for a while. But anyway, the Radium Girls were usually teenage girls when they started working at these factories that their job was to paint the radium paint onto watch dials or onto dials for like airplanes and stuff. And this started, the ones who became well known in these particular court cases in the media that this book is talking about were working mostly in the 1920s, and then these court cases were taking place in the 1930s. So basically, yeah, so the thing is that because they were using brushes to paint the radium paint, and they were not informed that the radium was harmful, and they were also having like no protective equipment, no like nothing at all to protect them from touching the radium or to even tell them that they shouldn't. They just wanted to finish painting as many dials as they could because they got paid on commission. And they were paid well. They were all happy to work at these places because they were like, this is a great job. Like, it's basically a factory job, but it isn't, you know, heavy lifting, and it pays really well. So, you know, and they'll hire teenage girls. So like there were two companies that the book mostly talked about, and one of them was in Newark and later Orange, New Jersey, which I think Orange is probably really close to Newark because a lot of the same people were working in the place when they moved the factory to Orange. And I'm like, well, I'm guessing they weren't commuting very far. I'm sure they didn't have cars. So like they must just be really close. And then the other one was in Ottawa, Illinois, which is kind of in central Illinois. Yeah, I think. It's near Starved Rock, and I've been to Starved Rock so many times, and I still don't quite know where it is on a map, but it's on the Illinois River, so like it must be in the central part of the state, right? Okay, so whatever. So this was pretty fucked up because, sorry, I was explaining how they got exposed to the radium though. So not only were they not wearing gloves or smocks or anything, they also were regularly putting the paintbrushes in their mouths in order to point them, you know, to like make them pointy so that they could paint finer detail. And yeah, they ate it basically, but they didn't know it was bad for them. And then several years later, all of them started developing mysterious symptoms. And then a lot of this book is about how these poor people just like had to go through so much, like, not only physical, medical, awful shit, a lot of which was just deeply horrifying. And for me especially, because like a lot of it, like for at least especially some of the girls working in New Jersey, they're a lot of like teeth and jaw issues. Because what radium does is it mimics calcium in our bodies, and it settles into the bones, and then it just sits there and continues to radiate, and until your bones fall apart, or if you're lucky enough and you happen to live longer, until you get cancer of some sort, probably a sarcoma, but maybe leukemia or something else. Yeah, super deeply horrifying. And then they had to fight tooth and nail for years in order to get these companies to give them like even a pittance of compensation. And frankly, it's infuriating because the companies just in the end mostly got away with it. Like, what these women accomplished ultimately was more in the line of getting the medical like establishment and the legal establishments to change some stuff regarding, like, look at us, radium is obviously like very bad for you, but also just laws about workers' comp regarding because there were a few things that you could get workers' compensation for, but like there were a lot of stipulations, and so this made that a bit easier, and just the idea of like workers' rights to not be constantly exposed to poisons at work, or at least if they are, to know about it. Just, yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. You know, they have Superfund sites in Ottawa because of this place. Like, God, okay. I thought it was quite a good book. I did not love everything about the writing style, but I think that's just personal preference. The subject matter was really interesting. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, keep in mind it has some seriously unpleasant medical stuff. Yeah, there's one incident, several incidents actually, of people's jaws just coming apart, and I was like, I don't know. That's horrifying. It was all very horrifying, although I'm happy to report at least that they didn't all die young. Like, I think the difference is that in Newark, at least the earlier cases, they were using mesothorium, which is a version of radium. I think it has more neutrons. Well, it's something that has a shorter half-life and then turns into radium. So it's just more devastating on their bodies. But then, like, the girls from Ottawa, some of them died young, but some of them lived to be quite old, actually. And, like, they were in pain, they would get cancer and stuff, but fortunately some of them had quite long lives. But still, it's just sort of infuriating to think these companies basically just going on and getting away with it and not caring. I don't understand how they could care so little for all of what they had wrought. Sound like I'm being very dramatic, but, like, you know, that's fucked up. Anyway, I would recommend the book. I thought it was pretty good.